Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another beautiful day of learning. And today is, of course, special. It's Rosh Chodesh, which is always a nice thing. And the topic of discussion is this week's parsha, and the most famous mitzvah coming out of this week's parsha is which mitzvah? Rosh Chodesh. Now, I think everybody here, if you're going to drop your work in the middle of the day and come to learn for a few minutes, you probably enjoy being Jewish. It's probably not the biggest headache in your life. If you were, you'd probably find better things to do now. So, what do you enjoy about being Jewish? What's your thing? I like Pesach. I like putting on tefillin. I like davening. I like wearing a yarmulke. What's a mitzvah that I can do all the time, whenever I want? Okay, so we have what's called the constant mitzvahs, right? There's a mitzvah so not everyone agrees that it's a mitzvah. The mitzvah to believe in God, to love God, to revere God, etc. Okay, what else? Something like practical. And what we're going to look at today is a mitzvah that we're all fulfilling conventionally, but it actually needs a little bit more of our attention. So first, so it's humanity's last frontier. I don't know if you saw yesterday. Somebody sent me a screenshot of it. What was it? It was a picture of a hammer smashing down on this guy, smashing him to pieces. Right? Why is that the best use of your time? Because it's the biggest commodity. It's the most precious thing everyone's looking. Every hour is a holy hour. Every second is sacred. And that's what we're going to take a look at. So first, a summary of the parsha, very briefly. The last of the 310 plagues are visited on Egypt. They are the swarm of locusts, which devours all the crops and greenery, a thick, palpable darkness enveloping the land, and all the firstborn of Egypt are killed at the stroke of midnight of the 15th day of the month of Nisan. Hashem commands the first mitzvah to be given to the people of Israel to establish a calendar based on monthly rebirth of the moon. The Israelites are also instructed to bring a Pesach offering to Hashem, a lamb or a kid to be slaughtered, and its blood sprinkled the doorposts and lintels of every Jewish home, so that Hashem should pass over the homes when he comes to kill the Egyptians firstborn. And the roasted meat of the offering is to be eaten that night, together with matzah and bitter herbs. Okay, so that was the Seder of the slaves. The death of the firstborn finally breaks Paro's resistance and literally drives the children of Israel from his land so hastily that there's no time for their dough to rise. By the way, that's a whole discussion for itself. What do you mean the dough didn't have time to rise? But we'll get to that another time. Before they go, they ask for gold, silver, garments, fulfilling the promise that Abraham made. That God made to Abraham that his descendants would leave Egypt with great wealth. Then the end of the parasha is where the children of Israel are commanded to consecrate all firstborn and to observe the anniversary of the Exodus each year by removing all leaven from their possession for 7 days, eating matzah, and telling the story of their redemption to their children. And they're commanded to wear tefillin on the arm and head as a reminder of the Exodus and their commitment to Hashem. Okay, that was the summary of the whole parsha. Any questions quickly on the parsha as a whole? Okay. So what we're going to be focusing on is what is the mitzvah of making time holy? What's that? Okay, so Shabbat makes time holy. What's the obvious problem with Shabbat for the time being?
Window of time.
It's only 1 day a week, right? At the end of benching, we ask Hashem to bring us to the time when Shabbat will be forever. But right now, 6 days a week, you got to make a living, except for during lunch hour. So we're going to take a look at this mitzvah in the parasha, text 1a. I'm not sure. What page is it?
I don't know what page.
Text 1a. And Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, do you see that? 44, yeah?
We've done the next one.
The next one, page 44. There we go.
There we go.
Who's going to read that for us? Go, Yaakov.
ויאמר כן כל משה ואל אהרון בארץ מצרים לאמור אחרי זה לכם ראש חדשים ראשון הוא לכם לחד השנה.
Yeah?
And then said to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This point of the moon for your remarks for you in the beginning of the months. This month will be for you in the first of the months of the year."
And that is the whole mitzvah. No more details are given. This, why not? Why aren't all of the other the laws of Kiddush HaChedesh? We know the Sanhedrin. They had to be such highly qualified astronomers to be able to understand the position and the sighting and of the moon and the stars and so many details. Hashem doesn't tell us one detail. Anybody ever read Parshas Mitzvah? The laws of the leper? I mean, I shouldn't talk like this, I'm a rabbi, but it's hands down the most boring parsha in the Torah. It talks about every type of skin rash, and the hairs are there, and the hairs are smaller, and it grows bigger and it goes smaller. So a skin rash, a leprosy that would happen to one person once in a blue moon, the Torah gives us full-blown 2 parshas to give us the whole detail. The mitzvah about sanctifying the calendar. I mean, this is literally Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, everything. It's no relevant to the whole nation. And the Gemara gives a fascinating explanation. Giving us such an important mitzvah in such cryptic terms, what is Hashem obviously telling us? There's more to the story. And what's the rest of the story when we study Torah? When we're studying the written Torah, what's the rest of the story? The oral Torah. There are certain mitzvahs, you read it, you're like, no, there must be more here. And the Gemara says, no, that Hashem is choosing this mitzvah, the oral Torah, which is essentially the heart, right? The written Torah is the body of Torah. The oral Torah is the soul, the heart, the life of Torah that brings Torah to life. The oral Torah, where does Hashem give us the pointer that it exists? In this mitzvah, okay? So Rashi there right away, text 1b, Rashi explains it for us. What does Rashi say? Text 1b, who else wants to read? Go, Julian, loud.
God showed him the moon as its point of renewal. He said to Moses, when the moon renews, it will mark the beginning of the month for you. However, Torah passages cannot depart from this straightforward meaning. God was referring to the month of Nisan and saying, this will be the first in the order of months. The following month, Iyar, will be the second month, and Sivan will be the third month.
Oh. What the question that Rashi is asking, what does it mean, Chodesh Hazeh, this Chodesh? So he says that God was pointing to the point where the moon comes back, right? But he says literally, what does it mean? He says this month. Which month? Nisan. The Jewish calendar, if you look in the Torah readings around the holidays, there are 2 descriptions of the holidays that have nothing to do with each other. One of them is, what's the festival of Pesach? Freedom, right? Took us out of Egypt. Shavuot is giving of the Torah. What is Sukkot? The clouds of glory. But there's another track. What's Pesach? It's the beginning of spring. What happens at the beginning of spring? It's the first harvest, the first grains, right? Now Shavuot, which is the beginning of summer. What's the beginning of summer? The first fruit. And what's Sukkot, which is autumn? That's the last of the harvest. Everything brought in. One track is nature. One track is supernatural, right? And Nisan, so we all think, when is the beginning of the year? Jewish New Year is when? Rosh Hashanah, right? That is the track of nature, right? That's when we begin the year in its natural form. Nisan is the beginning of the miracles, of the supernatural. So what is this first mitzvah of the Torah? This is the first time that we've given a mitzvah calculating and establishing the Jewish calendar. The mitzvah to establish the calendar. How? So very quickly, is the Jewish calendar solar or lunar? What's that? It's lunar, aligned to the solar seasons, right? The common secular calendar that we follow is purely solar, 365 and a quarter days, which is a full solar cycle, and that's all it is. The months that you see on a secular calendar are arbitrary. It's just taking the 365 days and chopping it up into 12, right? The Muslim calendar is purely lunar. In other words, it's 12 months, 12 lunar cycles. How long is a lunar cycle? 29 and a half days. 12 of those is 354 and a half, which means you're missing almost 11 days. Okay, so quickly, if Pesach is on this year, if Pesach, I don't know, if it falls on April 15th, when will it fall next year? April 4th. When will it fall the next year? March 23rd. The next year it'll fall on March 12th. The next year on March 1st. The next year on February 20th. But every 2 to 3 years, we dump an extra 30 days into the calendar to push it back into place. Okay? So if you ask a Jew, any Jew, when's Passover? All they say, April time, right? Well, the northern hemisphere will say spring, the southern hemisphere will say autumn, April time, right? Because it's always somewhere around there. If you ask a Muslim, when's Ramadan? Oh, look at you funny. Like, what do you mean? Every year, it's a different time. Because it's always falling 11 days back, and they don't bother, because their calendar is pretty lunar, they don't bother to push it forward into a season of the year. So this complexity is the first mitzvah. Now, obviously, here we're just shooting a few random ideas. The actual setup of the Jewish calendar is probably the most complicated area of Jewish law.
When was day one?
Of the Jewish calendar, Rosh Chodesh Nisan in Egypt, 3,338 years ago.
So that's where it all originated from.
Yeah. Now look at text 2, which is the first Rashi on the Torah. Right? What does the Rashi say? Paul, will you read that for us? Let the Zoom crowd take over for a minute.
That's
Paul Zoom.
Paul.
Sorry, Paul Lunch will do the next one.
That says the Torah should have begun with the passage, "This point of the moon's renewal marks for you, since it was the first mitzvah the Jews were instructed."
Beautiful. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. The Torah should not have started. What do we need the whole story with Genesis and this family drama going on for 4 generations? Just cut to the chase. It's the Torah is the book of mitzvahs. Torah should have started. He says Torah should have started in this week's parsha. Torah should start in this week's parsha and give us the mitzvah of the new moon. Why does he go into this whole thing with and he gives the explanation. See you, Daniel Shkayach. Thank you for joining. He gives a whole explanation. He says, why do we do it? And in order to show us the power, he explains, in order to establish Hashem's authority of the creation of the world, so that when the nations of the world say that we stole the land of Israel, we should say we didn't steal nothing. God created it, he gave it to you, he took it from you and he gave it to us. Fine. Yeah?
And that's also the first mitzvah that we get as a nation, so it wouldn't make sense to start off the Torah with this mitzvah on the nation.
What's that?
It wouldn't make sense to start off the Torah with this mitzvah, since the mitzvah that's bound on the nation, and on nation, it's not Torah, I mean nation coming out of Egypt.
Yeah. So now we understand why it's there. But here's the question: why is this? Just wait for Ariel to come back. Why is this the mitzvah? That's the first mitzvah of the Torah. This is what it is. So Rashi over there doesn't get into it. He just points to this as being the first mitzvah. What's so special about it? Right? And the answer is that what is the whole purpose of Judaism, which we'll get into now a little bit more in detail. What is the whole purpose of Judaism? The whole purpose of Judaism was what? is to renew, to create something new, right? To take a piece of leather that could have become a Harley Davidson motorcycle seat, right? And turn it into a mezuzah, right? To take $100, it could have been my entry to a New Year's party at a famous nightclub, and use that $100 to help somebody pay their rent, etc., etc. That's transformation. And that's what this mitzvah is. As the Rebbe explains it in text number 3. The pasuk of HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, you see text 3. This passage of this renewal marks for you. He says this encapsulates the aim and purpose of the entire Torah mitzvahs. And that's why it's the first mitzvah. The Torah and its mitzvahs were designed for Jewish people to bring newness into creation. Chodesh, the Hebrew word for month, means chiddush, newness. And the power of renewing creation was given to you, the Jewish people, who transformed the world into a home for God through studying Torah and observing its mitzvahs.
Did you generate?
Yeah. If you just tell, if you see one of the maintenance people, tell them to take it. That renewal is every single person's job in this world, right? And the words are very similar, chodesh and chiddush, right? What is Torah's purpose? To renew creation. How? With holiness. Hashem says, okay, I'm going to give you a Torah. I want you to make a chiddush. I want you to make something new here. What's the new thing that we make here? We make it holy. We make it sacred. Right? How do we do that? Yes, I gave the example of a piece of leather. I gave the example of a $100 bill. Other ways, I can pick up an esrog and make a bracha on food, etc. But it's all limited. It's all limited. Now, to be clear, when I pick up that esrog, what am I elevating? I'm elevating this esrog itself. It's now becoming from a 69-cent lemon. It's now becoming a 4,500 rand esrog. If you're going to get, by the way, in the worldwide esrog market, 4,500 rand is not huge money. Is any of the maintenance people there, Elvis, or maybe just call one of the guys from there? So when I make the bracha on the esrog, I'm elevating this esrog. Am I elevating all the other esrogs in the world? To some extent, because I wouldn't get this esrog if there wasn't a global esrog, not only market, before the market, if it didn't exist as a fruit. So all those other esrogs that fell off the trees onto the ground are also part of the mitzvah, because that's what's part of, you're holding these books here. So how did these books get here? They came here by plane. Okay, probably KLM was the cheapest airline to bring it. Okay, so you have 35,000 employees that were involved in bringing it here. It was printed in China. Okay, it was designed in technology made in California. So sitting here and learning a little bit of Torah, you're elevating a lot. But at the end of the day, you're using just the book. You're using just the esrog. When it comes to time, our access to space is limited. We fill up a certain amount of space. When we touch time, we're literally touching the universe. Why? So let's look at this medrash, text number 4, Shmois Rabbah. You see that?
Yes.
God sanctified the Jewish people. They came to someone and said, "You are holy. Be holy to me, for I am God. Kodesh, Ani Hashem." And because we are holy to God, whatever we sanctify becomes sacred. We have a power to make things holy. Okay, beautiful. You want to see an example? Consider the tabernacle's vessels. Moshe sanctified the tabernacle. Who sanctified the vessels? He could have sanctified the vessels too, but when the priest would come along and use a vessel to receive the flour, or to receive the oil, or to receive whatever it is, it became holy. Here's what the Medrash says, comparing the Kohanim standing in the temple, holding a vessel to receive a bit of fine flour. If when you fill up a vessel in the Bet HaMikdash, it becomes holy. When a Jew sanctifies the new month, when he fills the new month, what happens? Time is now becoming holy. Okay? In other words, the reason why this mitzvah of the new month is so important is not just because it fulfills the Torah's mission of renewal. It's sanctifying time itself. Right? Now,
Time is infinite.
How does this differ from Shabbat?
because Shabbat is to sanctify the seventh day of the week. The Kiddush HaChodesh is not about sanctifying the 1 second on the month to when the moon is reborn. It is to sanctify the entire month.
Yeah, fine.
Okay?
Time is infinite.
It can't be infinite. We think of it as infinite, but if it was infinite, we wouldn't be able to exist within it.
Because the sun and the moon rotate around it. That's what makes it.
But before we even get to the sun and the moon, space. How does space come into being? As a result of time. Time and space are the two metrics that God created.
Those are the two schools of thought.
What do you mean?
Time is space, space is time.
Yeah, and they are the foundation of all of existence. So now if you look in text 5a, thank you, Reb Paul.
What is the school of thought? Time is space.
So look now, Paul Lunch, not Paul Zoom. I want to read text 5a for us. Loud.
The term world lies exclusively within space and time. Space denotes east, west, north, and south, up and down, and the future.
Okay? So the world as we know it only exists within that space. Okay? Rabbi Chesky, you want to just come make sure everybody gives you a smile. Sorry, we have to turn around. Ariel, a big smile. Can you see everybody? Come closer. Okay, good. So when we talk about a world, what's the world as we know it? The world is both of these together. Time and space.
Within equal proportion?
What's that?
Within equal proportion?
No. And here's the interesting thing. If you look in text 5b, you have this beautiful teaching from Rabbi Shlomo ibn Gabirol. You can see his biography on the side there. He says, you exist. Ato nimsa. Before there was time, you were there. And before there was space, you were at rest. God exists before time and before space. He transcends them. Okay? They exist within him because he created them.
Say you were before there was time, you were at rest, and before there was space, you were there.
No. At rest, he means rest meaning like taking up space. In other words, you were existing. Your space was space before there was space. We can go into the Hebrew of it to get a little more. Okay? Now, which one came first? So we have here the Seforno on text 5c says something beautiful. Felicia, you want to read that for us?
In the beginning, Genesis 1 verse 1. This refers to the beginning of time. This was the first individual, indivisible mode of existence.
Oh, there was no time before this.
This refers to the beginning of time. This
Okay.
was the first indivisible moment of existence. There was no time before this.
So we know the second half of the verse as the moment of creation. That in the beginning, bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. He created heaven and earth. The Sforno says, no, that's the second half of the story. The first half of creation is the first word, Bereshis. He created time. Once he created time, he creates space. So now, space, again, why can space exist? There can only be a here and a there if there was a before and an after. Space needs time in order to give it meaning. So now, why is the first mitzvah of the Torah the sanctification of time? Because it's the sanctification of the foundation of all existence. Everything is there within it. Now, this is such a beautiful story. If we were living 2,000 years ago, and we had a Beis Hamikdash, and there was a Sanhedrin that was sanctifying the month, it would be amazing. But we can't go back in time. We are finite creatures, born 1,900 years plus after the temple was destroyed. And yes, the High Court continued for a few hundred years after the temple's destruction to continue sanctifying the new month, but it was on a very limited level. And at some point in the first millennium after the Beis Hamikdash, it stopped. So first of all, what does this have to do with us today? Is this just like a history story? And also, Yaakov made a good point. Primarily, Rosh Chodesh, the Kiddush HaChodesh would seem to be a one-day-a-month mitzvah like Shabbos. Why is it better than Shabbos? So it's limited to 2,000 years ago, one day a week. Sorry, I'll check out. I'll start with mitzvah number 2. What else is on the cards? Right? Well, first mitzvah, yeah, it's nice. Shabbos Mevarchim, like this past Shabbos, was very nice. Ariel led the beautiful singing of Kiddush HaChodesh, but that's not sanctifying the new month. It's referencing a historic mitzvah.
How does this tie into Genesis?
So the question at the beginning of Genesis is, why don't we start here? And the answer at the beginning of Genesis is, in order to show that God is the authority over the whole world. So actually, this is actually a beautiful point Paul is making. Rashi asks the question, why do we start the Torah at creation with all the drama of the first few thousand years? Why not just start in Egypt at mitzvah number 1? And he answers, because we needed it as an insurance policy against those who claim that we stole the land of Israel. It's not what Rashi is saying. What Rashi is saying is that the first mitzvah of the Torah, which is the mitzvah to sanctify time, where do we get the authority of that? We get that from Hashem. Yeah, question.
Sorry, I know, Rabbi brought this idea that Hashem, Shabbat that predates the Jewish people. So Hashem sanctifies the Shabbat, and the Shabbat sanctifies the Jewish people, and then we have the capacity to actually sanctify the new months.
Yeah.
We first get that capacity to sanctify from the Shabbat.
Yeah.
That's what makes us.
Yeah.
We can't skip the order.
So what does that have to do with us today? Now look in the Rambam. The Rambam says something fascinating. Text number 6, he says, when there's no Jewish court. Farrell, you want to read for us there? Was it Guy?
Yeah.
Text 6. No, English. What's in English?
There's no Jewish high court. We
Established monthly calendar. Yeah.
An institute leap years only according to the fixed calendar that is followed today. The testimony of new moon sightings are of no consequence.
You see the new moon today. Wonderful. Don't go running anywhere. There's nobody in Jerusalem who's waiting for you. Okay? Quite clear. How do we follow the calendar? Hillel Hakatan, basically an actuary that lived 1,500 years ago, established a 19-year cycle that we just keep using again and again and again, and that includes everything that we need. Okay? But here there's something more. We know, right? When Hashem says that everything was created, when the Torah says that everything was created to serve Hashem, look in text 7a. We have a very big job to do with this mitzvah today. What do we say there? Reb Shmuel, you want to read that for us? Text 7a.
Everything that God created in his world, he created for his glory.
Okay. Hashem created it for his glory. Okay. And what about me? Barbara, you want to read that for us? If you're there.
Okay, I was created for no purpose other than to serve my master.
I was created only to serve Hashem. And the world was created only for Hashem's glory. What about my job? What about my health? What about my family? I serve Hashem when I'm davening, when I'm learning. What about the rest of the day? What the rest of the time? So the Zohar says something so amazing. In text 7c.
When Hashem created the universe, he looked into the Torah and used it as a blueprint to create the world. Through the Torah, the world was created. The Torah itself establishes this. I, the Torah, was a nursling besides Hashem. Don't read the word as nursling, Amon. Read it as architect, Aman.
Man. Okay. In other words, yeah, there's a story here. Hashem is actually giving us the plans, the matrix of the universe, which is what? Which is Torah. And so we say that God created time, and then within time he created space. What did he use to create time? The Torah. The Torah, the word of Hashem. And that's why within the Torah itself, it talks about Hashem spoke the world into existence, because when we're learning the words of Hashem, we are learning literally the code, the lines of code that create the world as we know it. It's a very interesting point that we say. If you look at it, we said this morning in davening, we almost missed it. It sort of got skipped. But in Psalm 104, right, there's a beautiful verse. Asa yoreach l'moyadim. Hashem made a moon for the festivals. Says Rashi, for the festivals, he says this refers to calculating the times and the festivals. What do you mean zmanim uregalim? The regalim is the holidays. What about time? Rashi is actually pointing out that what David HaMelech is showing us is that Hashem created the whole cycle of time, waiting for us to put our hold onto it, to leave our mark on time. In other words, we're not just Jewish on Shabbos, we're not just Jewish on in Shul during davening. We are Jewish, and we are bringing Hashem's light into the world in every moment of time, right? Every day, Rashi is saying, is a mayit, is a point of time that Hashem wants and Hashem sees it must be sanctified.
Time doesn't have an end point.
What's that?
So time doesn't have an end point.
Why not?
An end point, not that we are concerned with. And so now, yeah, Yaakov.
Thank you.
Don't say that.
No, I was just going to say that text 7a is really interesting because it's very similar to the first brachot, the Sheva brachot. The blessed year of Shema, everything was glory, and the Rashi on that from the page A says, who's created everything was glory. The blessing does not deal directly with marriage. It's an honor of the guests who gather to celebrate the marriage. Well, they emulate God himself, who served as a member of the wedding party, and the God of Adam.
By the Sheva brachas, we make reference to this as well.
That's us welcoming the moon, so to speak.
100%. 100%. So now we're going to look at the mitzvah, and here's a beautiful point to note. We're talking about this mitzvah that we don't do anymore, right? Because what was the mitzvah? The mitzvah was for two witnesses to be standing on a mountaintop in Tekoa on the night and watching, and boom, they see the new month and they get onto their horses and they zoom to Jerusalem and they have a big feast in the temple, and now none of that is there. Now look at text 9a and see what the Rambam says. He doesn't mention witnesses. He doesn't mention horses. He doesn't mention Tekoa. He doesn't mention Jerusalem. He says, mitzvahs asay achas. It is one mitzvah to calculate, to know, and to determine the first day of each month of the year. In other words, in whatever tool Hashem is giving you, a Jew has a mitzvah today to know when the month is, the beginning of the month, and through that the entire month. So the mitzvah never ended. It used to be done in one way. Now we're not doing this. We're doing it a different way. The mitzvah is still here. Right? Now, he continues in text 9b. He says, not so simple. The high court makes calculation like those of the astronomers who know the locations of the stars and the paths in their orbits. They conduct careful research to determine whether or not the moon will be visible at the appropriate time. In other words, the 30th night of the month. Great. But now, when we do it, when we calculate the lunar cycle, when we notice the Jewish calendar dates, he says through this, the Chachamim are transforming every moment into service of Hashem. When they do that, when the sages sit and calculate when is the 28th day, the 29th day, the 30th, the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, right? And we know that the doubt of the full moon goes all the way till the 15th of the month, right? It takes 2 weeks, it's to say, till everybody would find out. In other words, the entirety of the month is consumed with the calculation of Rosh Chodesh. In other words, the whole month is the month of Kiddush HaChodesh. From beginning to end, we're always wondering and calculating and noticing. And to be clear, I think it's a mitzvah we can be doing a lot better at. Even here at our shul, I've been promising this forever. We should start doing the aliyahs on the Shabbos before the real birthday, right? Not the passport birthdays. Let's stop using the passport birthdays. Please God, should get to that soon. But to know, one word which I don't like is Jewish birthdays. Nobody has Jewish birthdays. You have your birthday. When's your birthday? Your birthday is the 13th of Kislev, right?
Yud Nisan.
Or Yud Aleph Nisan, Shkayach Ariel. Ariel's birthday, the Rebbe's birthday, the 11th of Nisan. Then you also have a passport birthday in order to get your ID number in South Africa. But we have to start identifying with our Jewish dates. Yeah, question?
We focus the week of Shabbat. It's like you say, Yom Rishon, the Shabbat, and the song of the day.
Yeah.
So how do we...
Okay, so Shabbat. Okay, so there's two types of holiness of times. We do not give the holiness of time that Shabbos is. Shabbos is Hashem's holiness, right? He puts it in. And that sanctifies the other 6 days of the week. But holiness, the mark that we make on time is Rosh Chodesh. And here's, yeah?
What does Chodesh mean?
What does Chodesh mean? Literally, it means month, or it has the same root as Chidush, which means renewal. And in conclusion, text 10. Hashem's purpose in creating the months of the year is not entirely fulfilled by consecrating the first of the month and the festivals, meaning specific days of the month. It is fulfilled when we reveal that the entire spectrum of time, all the days of the month, was created for Hashem's sake. And this is accomplished by fulfilling the mitzvah of calculating and knowing all the details of the lunar cycle, the moon's orbit, and the position of the stars to determine when the first of each month will fall. So, if you were a sage in the Sanhedrin, knowing the Jewish calendar and calculating it 2,000 years ago would have meant basically being an astronomical engineer, right? Figuring out whatever that would look like.
You are right in what you say, because your sites are based on the Jewish calendar.
Oh, why do we do only yard sites? When someone dies, then we remember that we have our own calendar. Our birthdays, everything we should think of today. Today is the 1st of Shvat. Tomorrow is the 2nd of Shvat. Wednesday is the 3rd of Shvat. And so on and so forth.
give it more meaning.
Yeah, 100%. Merely establishing and consecrating the first of the month and the festival dates leaves the intervening days to serve as placeholders for the sacrifice festival dates, meaning we only need to calculate the entire months to know when Rosh Hashanah and the other holidays will fall, right? That's not what the Jewish calendar is for. The Jewish calendar is not for Rosh Hashanah. The calendar is for Wednesday and Thursday and every day of the week. When we calculate the entire lunar orbit, so when the sages were calculating the whole orbit of the whole month, to know when the first of the month falls, the entire month becomes part of the mitzvah. The mitzvah isn't just to consecrate the first of the month. The mitzvah is to calculate and know that the entire time continuum was created for a divine purpose. The sages had to immerse themselves into that. Okay? In other words, even though in the modern age we no longer consecrate the months, we can fulfill the primary part of the mitzvah by performing the calculations for each day of the month and recognizing the holiness of each day. We must start thinking on real terms, thinking of time as time truly is defined by the mitzvah. And that's why the calculation of the calendar is the first mitzvah of the Torah, because it's the foundation. Just like before Hashem created space, He created time to hold space. Before Hashem gave us 612 mitzvahs, He gave us the mitzvah of sanctifying time that holds all the rest of them within it. Okay, key points. Yeah, do you see that last page? Number one, the mitzvah is to establish and manage the Jewish calendar. It is the first to be given in the Torah. This demonstrates that it is the most fundamental mitzvah. 2, time was God's first creation. It is the basic ingredient of the universe. 3, God created the world for His glory. If time, the platform for all existence, is made holy by using it to fulfill Hashem's will, the rest of the universe will follow. Plug into time and everything else falls into place. We make time holy by celebrating the sacred days of the month. When we celebrate Shabbat and the festivals, time itself becomes a receptacle of holiness. Moreover, every day of the month becomes a vehicle through which the mitzvah of establishing the calendar is fulfilled, and that's why the mitzvah of the Jewish calendar is so fundamental. Any questions? Yeah? Hey, have a beautiful day, everybody. We're going to daven mincha now.
Thanks,
See you,
Rabbi.
Paul. See you, Ross. See you, Barbara.
Thank you very much.